सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। चैतन्यं सर्वगं सर्वं सर्वभूतगुहाशयं यत्सर्वविषयातीतं तस्मै सर्वविदे नमः। We're starting the new chapter, the 14th chapter called Swapna Smriti Prakaranam. The chapter of it, the beginning is Swapna Smrityoho, that is called Swapna Smriti Prakaranam. Swapna dream, Smriti is memory. To introducing this chapter, on my page 194, the Tikakara says, Purvasmin Prakarane Antahkarana Avivekad Atmani Samsaritva Praditihi. The previous chapter was said that Atmani Samsara Praditihi, the perception of samsara, the notion of samsara, Atmani in the self, is antahkarana avivekad. It is because of inability to distinguish the consciousness Atma which is witnessed from antahkarana which is witnessed. And thus there is to lump it together, and the limitation of antahkarana thought to be limitations of myself. That's why I feel limited. It's called samsari. Na swataha, that Atma by itself is not a samsari, not limited. Iti shastra pramanyat bhadita ajnanat karyo brahma rupa eva atma. So shastra pramanyat tattvamasi, this is what the shastra says. Bhadita ajnanatat karyo brahma rupa eva atma. Brahma Rupa Eva Atma, Atma is of the nature of Brahman, I am Brahman. So what's the need of saying that? Bhadita Ajnana Tat Karya. Upon Atma the Ajnana Tat Karya Adhyasa is there. The ignorance and the products of Aham Mama are all superimposed upon the Atma. So Shastra Pramanya. Shastra says you are Brahma. Aham Brahma, Atma is Brahma, the Shastra Pramana. Shastra can be Pramana only when my conclusion about myself or my notion about myself is wrong. In that aham, the I notion, the ajnana, tatkaryam, the ignorance and the products of ignorance, which are aham mama, they are also lumped together. That's how I perceive myself. Bhadita, recognizing that they do not belong to the self, they belong to the upadi, to anatma, they are witnessed, their object. And then when that bhada is done, Brahma Rupa Eva Atma iti, recognize that I am none other than Brahman. Iti nirdhayatam. So this was asserted in the previous chapter. Idanim. So what's it now? Idanim antahkaranasya parokshvatvat, some kind of a question. Antahkaranam, our mind, is paroksham. Paroksha and aparoksha. Aparoksha, immediate. Paroksha, mediate, meaning that there is some intervention between myself and antahkaranam. That's called paroksha. When there is no intervention, it's called aparoksha. Antahkaranasya parokshatvat. Somebody says that antahkaranam, the mind, is paroksham, not immediately illumined by Atma. Samsara pratibhasasya aparokshatvat. Where samsara, the aham mama, or a sense of limitedness, is experienced immediately, aparokshatvat. That I am a limited being, and therefore all the consequences of limitations are in mind. They are all directly experienced called aparokshatvat. So samsara is experienced aparokshataya as an immediate reality. Because mind is different from me, it is paroksha. So samsara is experienced as my own self, mind is different from me. न तत् प्रतिभासो बुद्धि अविकृतः इति. Therefore, appearance of samsara in Atma belongs to Atma because it is immediate. Doesn't belong to buddhi or antahkarana. Buddhi is paroksha, is separate. So this is the question here. That buddhi is not aparoksha, buddhi is paroksha. Samsara is experienced aparokshate as my very self. Therefore, your conclusion that buddhi aviveka kritaha samsara, that samsara, the sense of being limited in Atma, is on account of not distinguishing Atma and buddhi. That's not right because they are separate. Therefore, iti ashankya, this is a shanka. That I experience samsara, limitedness as an immediate reality. Antahkaranam is something that is objectified. How can you say that samsara is product of the identification of antahkaranam? Meaning, suggestion is that samsara is the nature of Atma because Atma is aparoksha, samsara also is aparoksha. The mind or buddhi is paroksha. Iti antahkaranasya aparokshatva pratipadana purvakam. So here now, pratipadanam, it is explained how antahkaranam also is aparoksham. Whatever be the role of the nature of samsara, or the place of samsara is also the place of antahkarana. Meaning samsara, or the sense of limitedness, is due to antahkaranam and not the nature of Atma. Antahkaranasya aparokshatva pratipadanapurukam. पूर्वोक्त शास्त्रार्थे युक्ति प्रदर्शन परम. So Shastrartha, what Shastra says, what was discussed or described in the earlier chapter, that I am Brahman was based on the statement of Shastra. So this Prakaranam provides a yukti pradarshana purvakam. Not only that I am Brahman based on what the Shastra or Upanishad says, but then by the reasoning also we can show how Brahman is my nature. So that is the whole trend of this chapter. Prakram prakramate swapna smrityoho iti. So first verse says, swapna smrityor ghataderhi rupa bhasa pradrishyate puranunam tadakara dhir-drishtetyanumiyate. Swapna smrityoho. So these two states of mind are stated. Swapna is the dream and smriti is the memory. In these two, ghatadehi rupabhasa pradrishyate. In swapna, the dream also you see ghata, etc. In memory also, ghatapata appears in your mind. Rupabhasa is not the real ghata that you see in the dream, or real ghata or part that you see in the memory is abhasa, is only an appearance of ghata that you see in the dream or in the memory. So this is a statement, this is a reality. Therefore, what do you conclude from there? Puranunam tadakara dhidustet anumiyate ya smritihi sa anubhava purvika. Memory must be preceded by the experience. So memory can be of the experience that you have had. Therefore, in memory and dream also is the product of the memory. Therefore, the experience of dream and the memory point out that puranunam tadakara dhidishta, that in the puram earlier, in the waking state or in the experience state, I have seen the buddhi or the di of the ghatakara vritti I must have seen. In the waking state I must have seen ghatakara vritti. Therefore, I see it in dream or I see it in my smriti or memory. So that's why Tikakara says he, swapna smrityoho ghatadehe he, that he, yasmat, because swapna smrityoho swapne smritauja, swapna smrityoho, in the dream as well as in the memory. Ghatadehe rupabhasa pradrishyate. Ghatadehe, of entities such as ghata means any object. Vishayat rupabhasa, meaning in dream you do not see that object or in the memory, but rupabhasa, an appearance of that object you see in the dream. Akara avabhasa drishyate anubhuyate. Although in the dream you think you are experiencing a tangible object, in reality what you are experiencing is only an appearance of that object or an object created from impressions of that object. A picture in the mind created from the impression of the object is what you experience in dream. Akara avabhaso drishyate, an appearance of that object is seen, anubhuyate. So this is our observation. From that, what is our conclusion? Tasmat, therefore. He yasmat, so tasmat, that is added. Pura, so then next step, Pura Nunam Tadakara Dihi Drishta iti Anume, therefore Anumiyate we infer. Pura means Purvam Jagad Avasthayam, Anuva Avasthayam api. Earlier in the waking state, or whenever you experience this Ghatapata, Nunam Avashyam Tadakara Ghatadi Akara Dihi Antahkarnavritti Drishta. You cannot see something in dream unless you experience that earlier. You cannot also have memory unless you have the experience of an entity. Your dream is the result of what you experience in the waking state, usually. Memory is also the result of an experience. Therefore, Jagradavastha Anubhavavastham, the dream objects are seen because of they were seen early in Jagradavastha, and memory is because of Anubhavavastha that you experienced it. Swapna Smrutyoho, in that order. Nunam Avashyam Tadakara Ghatadiyakara. Therefore, we can say very clear logically, with conviction, that Tadakara Ghatadiyakara Dihi Antahkarnavristihi Drishta Sakshat Anubhuta iti Anumiyate. So from this, the Hanuman inference is there, that what you see in the dream, you must have experienced in the waking state, and what you recognize in memory must have been experienced earlier. So this is the Anumana. What's the reason why you come to this Anumanam? Says Swapna Smrityoho Drishtartha Vishatva Niyamat. The niyama, the rule is that in Swapna you cannot see any object, you can see only an object that you have seen in the waking. In memory also you cannot see a new object, you must have seen that object, experienced that object earlier. This is the rule. Ya smriti sa anubhava purvika. Smriti always is preceded by anubhava or experience, so also dream is preceded by experience. Puro drishtasya bahyarthasya atra abhavat. And in dream there is no bahyartha. We know that in dream there is no tangible object, external object, because in order to experience that external object requires sense organs. The sense organs are not operating in the dream. Therefore there is no bahyartha, there is no external object, and still you are experiencing, so it is the impression from the waking. Same thing in the memory also. Swapna smrityoho upalabhyamano vishaya arthakarvatmat antahkaranameva iti. So the vishaya, the object that is upalabhyamana, the object such as Ghatapata, upalabhyamana, which is perceived or experienced in Swapna and the Smriti, it is not the tangible object or external object. Now what is it? Arthakar vrittivat antahkaranameva. In the dream, when you see, you think that you are experiencing Ghata. In fact, what you are doing here, what is happening to you is, you are only experiencing the Ghataka, a mind having the vritti of Ghata. In the memory also, you may feel that you are seeing the Ghata, but in memory also, what you are seeing is the mind, which has taken the form of Ghata. And how does the mind take the form of Ghata? Because of previous experience. When it is recalled, then the mind gets that form. In the dream also, the karma recalls, and therefore the mind sees that or creates that. Iti Jagrat Purvanubhavayoho api. So this is very clear that in the dream you see this thought antahkarana. So ghatakara, padarthakara vritti, vishayakara vritti is what you are seeing. Dream also you are seeing vishayakara vritti. Therefore, Jagrat Purva Anubhavayoho api antahkaranameva arthat. Therefore, in waking also, what you saw was the antahkarana vritti. Even in waking also, when we think that we are perceiving as a part, an object as a ghata, that perception can take place only when our mind assumes the form of that object. If there is no contact in the mind with the object, then perception doesn't take place, even the object may be there. So we, from the experience of dream and memory, is now concluded that Jagrat Purva Anubhavayoho api. For dream, the Jagrat; for memory, Purva Anubhava. Antahkaranameva arthakara vrittimat aproksham anubhutamiti kalpyate. In waking also, you have experienced only antahkarana. And as an immediate entity, without any intervention between you and antahkarana, therefore, antahkarana has been experienced aparokshataya as an immediate entity. In the waking, then only you can experience that antahkarana in the dream. At any time, the object of experience is nothing but the object, experience of the object is experience of antahkarana, which has taken the form of that object. So from dream and memory, you conclude that in the waking also you must have experience, you are experiencing the objects, the mind which has taken the form of the object as an immediate entity. So waking also, mind is aparoksham. Then only you can experience that object. Tasmat sarvasu vyavasthasu vrittimat antahkaranasya aparokshatvat. So antahkarana is not paroksha. Between the self which is witness and antahkarana, there is no intervention. Atma directly illumines or witnesses antahkarana, therefore is aparoksham. Tadgata chidavasa avivekat. What is happening is that when antahkarana vritti is there, it reflects the chit or consciousness, therefore there is reflected consciousness called chidavasa. That chidavasa is taken away the self. So that viveka is not there, that what I am watching or witnessing is chidavasa, my reflection, and the reflection is taken to be myself. Like the sun watching reflection in water, I would conclude that I am so and so, I am one among many, I am small, limited, restless, changing, dull. The tadgata chidavasa avivekat. Because it is the nature of antahkarana to reflect consciousness. So chidavasa, then only antahkarana is enlivened and does its job. Therefore, taking myself to be chidavasa, samsaritva avabhasa aparoksha yukta hedi bhavaha. The reason why you say that samsara is aparoksha, immediate experience, is because the antahkaranam in which chidabhasa is there also is an immediate experience, otherwise you cannot have samsara as an immediate experience. So question was that antahkarana is paroksham, samsara is aparoksha. So how can you say that samsara is because of antahkaranam? Looks like samsara is the nature of Atma. He says, no, Antakarana also is aparoksham. Chidavasa also is aparoksha. And therefore, your Brahma also is aparoksha. Samsara is aparoksha. Evam antahkaranasya aparokshatve nirupite. Alright, in this manner, you have now determined that antahkarana is aparoksham. Kim ayatam atmaheti, so what? If antahkarana is aparoksham, so what does it mean to the self? Iti apekshayam drishyat antahkaranadi sanghatat viveka siddhi ayatayati sadushtantamaha. Drishyat antahkaranadi sanghatat viveka siddhi ayata. You realize that the samsara all belongs to antahkaranam, and due to aviveka, not distinguishing antahkaranam as an object, and drishya, you are superimposing that one drashta. So once you see antahkarana paroksham and aviveka brings about samsara, then drishyat antahkaranadi sanghatat. Antahkarana sanghata, this upadhi, beginning of antahkarana is all drishya. So now you can see that antahkaranam chidavasa is drishya, atma is drashta, and that is how the viveka is possible now. Viveka siddhi ayata, therefore the viveka siddhi, the prasakkaranam, separation in the mind of Atma from this antahkaranam and chidavasa is what can be accomplished. Is sadushtantamaha. That is explained with drishtanta bhikshamati. So next verse is bhikshamatanyatha swapne drashto deho na sasvayam जाग्रदृश्यात् तथा देहात् दृष्ट्वानन्य एव सः. भिक्षाम अटन यथा स्वप्ने भिक्षाम अटन. Imagine that a bhikshuka has a dream, and in the dream he is begging, he's doing, so bhikshacharanam is doing, he is begging food in the dream. So the bhikshu sees in the dream that he has gone for bhiksha, he is begging bhiksha. That is the dream. Drushto deho nasasvam. So he sees himself in the dream. But the body that this bhikshu sees in the dream is not himself. In a way he sees himself, his own body. But certainly he is not that body, although in the waking he may be the body, but the dream body is very much drishyam. Therefore it is clear that although he may not see that distinction in the dream, but certainly in the dream the body that he sees of the bhikshu is not his body, he is not himself. Jagradasya tatha dehat. Similarly also, the body that you see in the Jagrat is similar. So dream serves as an example to understand the waking also. That you saw that body in the dream also, at that time you thought that you are you, but you realize that you are not that, it's a drishyam. Therefore the body that you think is you is also drishyam. Therefore, drashtritvat anyeva saha. Therefore, this body also is different from the drashta. So that's the viveka. Moment drishyatvam is established, Antahkarana is drishyam, it established, and drashta is different from drishyam, that viveka can be done. So the tika is sushuptasya yatehe swapne bhiksham atan drushtayo deha. Yati or a sannyasi who is sleeping or dreaming, because you see the dream of the thing that you are doing. Every day he goes for bhiksha, so he may as well see that in the dream. Yo deha. So bhiksham atan deha. The deha that is performing that bhiksha. Swaswayam na bhavati. Even though he may not know that in the dream, it is clear that that is not himself. Meaning dasthana bhavati. That the body that he sees in the dream is not drashta, is drishyam. Yatha tad dehatmatvam abhimanyano api tadarkarma bhavati. He may not recognize that in the dream, because it is habit to identify with the body. So in dream also he would identify the dream body, and there also he may continue to think that I am a bhikshu. This is I, this body is I. When you wake up, you realize that cannot be so, because you can see that body and you can see this body. Sorry, that body is not I. Although I thought it to be I in dream, so that was identification. So dehatmatvam abhimanyamanopi. In the dream, even though he had the abhiman of a notion that deha is atma, tadatmako anubhati. In the waking, he can see that what he took himself in dream cannot be right. That I was not that bhikshu deha was not I in the dream. So in dream that body is drishyam, is very clear. Even though during dream he may take the body to be himself, when he wakes up it is very clear that I cannot be the body, because it is drishyam, it is something experienced, something that is seen. Tatha jagrad dushyadapi bhiksham atan yatha swapne de drishto deho nasaswayam tatha jagrad dushyad dehad. So this body that is seen in the waking, which I take to be myself. Atma anya eva drashtutvaditi. So just as the dream body I was not, Atma as self was different from the dream body, so from the waking body, Atma is different. Ityartha. So here the verse only talks about deha, but the tika, deha padam, upalakshanam, that should include indriyantah karanayoho api. The body also includes the sense organ, includes the mind, because it's a whole package. Body cannot be moving about doing bhiksha unless sense organs are there, legs etc. are there. He cannot go from one plane, the mind is there, therefore all of this is in the category of drishya. Tathacha prayoga, therefore this is anuman prayoga. Vimato dehadhi na atma. Deha, sense organs, in antahkaranam, mind cannot be atma. The whole analysis for viveka, for separating atma from atma, because that lumping together happens because of ignorance. I don't know. Poor thing keeps on making noise. Vimato dehadihi na atma. Here the difference of opinion is whether deha is atma or not. So vimataha, the subject matter of this discussion or this contention that dehadi Is Atma or not? It is not Atma. Drishyatvad, because there is drishyam, experience, perceived. Swapna drishya dehadivat, like the dream body, etc. बुद्धिरेव सर्वावस्थासु अर्थाकारा दृश्यते इति उक्तमर्थं दृष्टान्तेन स्पष्टयति. So earlier it was taken for granted that it is a buddhi that you see. Buddhi takes the akara. Buddhi or antahkaranam takes the akara of an object, and that's what you see. So now addressing that part, uktamartham drishtantena spashtayati. With drishtanta now explains how it is buddhi or antahkaranam that assumes the form of different objects. So third verse says, Musha siktam yatha tamram tannibham jayate tatha रूपादीन व्याप्नुवत् चित्तम् तन्निभं दृश्यते ध्रुवम्. As I said, we are coming there to square the most fundamentals, Vedanta's fundamentals are one by one talked in these chapters. Musha siktam yatha tamram tannibham jayate. This is Drishtanta. Just as the molten copper, when poured in a mold, takes the form, that mold. So this is well accepted, that's why it becomes a drishtanta. Tatha similarly also, rupadin vyapnuvat chittam tannibham drishyate dhruvam. Similarly also, chittam, the mind. So when the mind contacts through the eyes or sense organ and objects such as a part, it pervades that object or takes the form of the object. A standard example that is given is in a garden. You have a small little canal and then you have a bigger field, in which the plants are there. So water travels through that canal and takes the form of that field. So the mind moves out through the aperture of the eyes, canal, and takes the form of the object. So you can say the mind, just as the water pervades that little field, so also the mind pervades that object and takes the form of the object. Rupadin vyapnuvat chittam tannibham drishyate dhruvam. Therefore, the chitta or the mind, sometimes they use the word chitta, sometimes dhi, sometimes antahkaranam. Rupadin, rupa means the form, color, etc., the object, the drishya. Vyapnuvat chittam, the chitta that pervades, takes that form. Tannibham drishyate dhruvam. Therefore, the chitta also, just as a molten metal takes the form of the mold, so also the mind takes the form of the object. And therefore, what you see is only the mind which has taken the form of the object. And that is seen. That's drishyam. So see the tika, Musha antas sushira mrit pratima. There is an inner gap, inner void. So of the nature of pratima or of the nature of form, there is inner void, this is called a mold. Yatha agni samparkat dravibhutam tamram mushayam nishiktam. Just agni samparkat dravibhutam tamram. The copper that is melted because of the being heated in the fire. Mushayam nishiktam, and it is poured in the mold. Nishiktam and nikshiptam. Nikshiptam sat tannibham jayate. Tas samanakriti bhavati. Molten copper or metal takes the same form as that of the mold. Tada chittam api rupadin vishayan vyapnuvat. Just as water take the form of that little field, so also the mind takes the form of that object. Rupadin vishayan vyapnuvan tan-nibham means tat-samanam, tat-samanakriti. Becomes, appears just like that object. So mind also assumes the form of that object, being poured like in a mold. Tadakaram jayate. So this is fundamental thing that being told here. What is the process by which the mind takes the form of an object? So what happens when you perceive an object as a part? What you are perceiving is the mind which has taken the form of the part. How does the mind take the form of an object? The mind reaches out, flows through the channel of the sense organ, contacts the object, takes that form. That's how the vritti or thought form of that object is formed, and that's what you see. Going to the next one, Nanu. Mushastikta tamrasya kathina musha bhigatena shaityavattu tadakarapatti yujyate. So you gave the example of a molten copper, let us say, molten copper poured in a mold. But well, you see, there is something specific about that example. What's the reason why the molten matter takes the form of the mold? Musha sikta tamrasya. The tamram or the copper that is poured in the mold, kathina musha bhigatena shaityapattau. That mold is very solid or hard. And so the molten matter comes in contact with the mold and gets cooled, you see. If the mold was not hard, then mold might also expand or something may happen to that, but even though metal is very hot, the mold being very hard remains what it is, and therefore that metal, when it comes in contact with the mold surface, cools down, and therefore shaityapattu tadakarapatti. That's when the molten metal assumes the form of that mold. It yujyate. So there is understand, that example is okay. So now question is whether you are given an apt example or not. In explaining how the mind takes the form of the object, you gave the example of the molten metal poured in a mold. But whether that example is apt or not, because there seems to be some discrepancy between the example and what is illustration and what is illustrated, that's what the Purvapakshi wants to show. Chittasya tu amurtatvat vishaya aptavapi vyaptavi katham tadakarapatti sambhava. The molten matter can take the form when it's cooled down, but chittam is nirakaram. So, amurtatvat, chitta doesn't have a form. Vishaya vyaptavi. Therefore, even if you suppose you pour space in this pot, space doesn't take that form because space doesn't have form. Therefore, if you pour. So similarly, antahkarana also doesn't have form. So how do you pour antahkarana in the mold of an object and expect that antahkarana takes the form of the object? So that example does not seem to be an apt example. Iti asankya drishtantantaram aha. If you want to compare or you want to take into account all aspects of drishtanta, then we'll give you another drishtanta. Vyanjako vaiti. So next one says, Vyanjako va yatha lokaha Vyangyasya karata miyat सर्वार्थ व्यंजकत्वाद्धि अर्थाकारा प्रदृश्यते. Vyanjaka, one that reveals, is called Vyanjaka. Vyakti, Abhivyakti, so to manifest. Vyanjaka is that which brings to manifestation. Yatha alokaha. Aloka means the light. So what does the light do? Light brings to manifestation an object otherwise not manifest. In the dark, the object is there, but it is not Vyanja. Vyanja means it is not manifest, not Vyakta. So what does the light do? Light brings to manifestation what is. Light does not create the object. Light brings to manifestation what is already there. So light is called Vyanjakam, the manifester, you can say. Yatha alokaha. So apparently Tikakara takes that as two examples. Vyanjaka agnyadi ayah pindadehe agnyadihi ayah pindadehe. Ayah pinda is the iron ball, let's say, a lump of iron. Then it is fire that brings it to manifestation by imparting red color to that. Otherwise, the iron may not be seen in a dark room, but then with the fire it becomes red and therefore it becomes evident. Aloko va ghatadehe. So anyway, otherwise one example is all right, but here the verse is interpreted as two examples. Vyanjaka is taken as separate. But Vyanjaka also is aloka is Vyanjaka. Anyway, so the light also illumines or brings to manifestation the ghata, etc. Vyangyasya akaranam yat. So light assumes the form of the object that is lighted. Otherwise, this object will not be perceived by us. We can perceive the object when the light, which is a manifest of the object, assumes the form of that object. It's also the well-known thing. Sarvartha vyanjikatvaddhi athakara pradushyate. Then buddhi also is like the fire. That's why he gave the example of fire, which pervades the iron and therefore makes the iron manifest. So also the buddhi pervades an object such as this and brings to manifestation, you can say. Because buddhi is not light, although Chidabhasa is light. So what happens is buddhi takes the form of ghatapata object, and the Chidabhasa or the consciousness reflected on buddhi illumines the object. That's how they explain. So like the fire which takes the form of the iron, the buddhi takes the form of the object. Like the light that illumines an object, that Chidabhasa illumines the object. Sarvartha vyanjikatvaddhi arthakara pradushyate. So buddhi also, since it doesn't have its own form, therefore it can objectify all the forms. Sarvartha vyanjikatvad. So light just as illumines any object, so also buddhi can illumine or manifest any object. Dihi arthakara. Therefore, it is the or the buddhi that takes the form of the artha or object. Said earlier. So what you are perceiving is the buddhi or mind which has taken the form of an object. How does it do? So that prakriya is explained here. First example was pouring molten metal in a mold. Second example is the fire illumining the iron or the light illumining an object. बुद्धेः अन्वयमुखेन स्वप्नस्मृत्यो यत्र उपादेम परोक्षत्व अनुद्य व्यतिरेकमुखेन उपादयति. So the first was स्वप्नस्मृत्यो घटादिः रूपाभासः प्रदुष्यते. Anvaya. That in Swapna and the Smriti, it is the Ghatadehe Rupa Abhasa Pradushyate. What you see is the abhasa of an object in the Swapna and Smriti, and not an object itself. And therefore, the mind that takes the form of the object is immediate, therefore Antahkarana is immediate. Because Antahkarana is what you are experiencing when you experience an object. Buddha Anvaya Mikhena Swapna Smrutyaho ityatra upaditam aparokshatvam anudya. So aparokshatvam, or immediateness of the Antahkarana, was expounded in the first verse, reiterating that Vyatireka Mukhena Upaya, that is Anvaya Mukhena. Now, because the mind is there, takes the form of the object, that's what you see. Vyatireka Mukhena, with Vyatireka now, therefore Dhi eva iti. So, the fifth verse is Dhireva Arthaswarupahi Pumsa Drushta Purapicha Nachet Swapne Katham Pashyed Smarto Va Krutih Kutah. So first of all said how the buddhi takes the form of the object and that is seen. Second is that so Dhi eva arthaswarupa pumsa drushta purapicha. In the waking also it is buddhi or the mind alone that you are seeing having taken the form of an object. In the waking state or an experience of an object, what you are, so now same statement is made here. That in the dream, in the waking, you have experienced an object, the mind which has taken the form of an object, and that waking experience alone comes in the dream. Or the memory also presupposes that you have experienced that object, where the mind assumes the form of that object. So in the dream as well as in the memory, you are experiencing the mind which has taken the form of the object. This is called Anuvada. So this part is Anudya Anuvada. Now Vyatireka Mukhena Upapadayati. By Vyatireka it is now justified. So second line says, Nachet Swapne Katham Pasya. Had that not been the case, if the buddhi does not take the form of the object, then how can you see it in the dream or the memory? Na chet swapne katham pasye smarato va krutih kutah. The fact that you experience the objects in the dream, if the buddhi did not take the form of the object, how could you see it in the dream? First said that because buddhi takes the form of the object, therefore you see in the dream. Now it says that if buddhi did not take the form of the object, how could you see it in the dream? If buddhi did not take the form of the object, how could you remember it? So therefore, Vyatireka Mukhena. In a contrary way also, the same thing is established. Again, alokadi vat vyanjakatvat buddhe vyangyakaratma uktam. Just as the light, when it illumines an object as a part, takes the form of the part, light takes the form of the part that is illumined, and that buddhi also takes the form of the object that it illumines or objectifies. Spashtayati. So that was said in the fourth verse is now further clarified in the sixth verse. Vyanjagatvam tadevasyaha रूपाद्याकार दृश्यता दृष्टृत्वं च दृशेस्तद्वत् व्याप्ति स्याद्य उद्भवे। अस्याः रूपादि आकार दृश्यता तदेव व्यंजकत्वम्। So what do you mean by the buddhi revealing or manifesting an object? Rupadi akara drishyata, that the buddhi takes the form of a rupa, means form, etc., and becomes drishya like rupa, that is called vyanjakatvam. So light in fact manifests an object in a primary sense. Buddhi is not that way that it objects, means that buddhi takes the form of that object. That's what is meant by buddhi manifesting the object. दृष्टृत्वं च दृश्ये तद्वद व्याप्ति स्याद्य उद्भवे। दृश्ये दृष्टृत्वं, दृश्य, the consciousness is drashta, tad vyapti स्याद्य उद्भवे. So when the object is there, how the mind pervades that, so also vritti arises, consciousness pervades it, You can call it pervading, call it manifesting, revealing. In case the buddhi, it pervades the object, and we call it the buddhi reveals the object. In case of consciousness, as the thought arises, the consciousness illumines that, and that's what we call the illumination of vyanjakatva manifesting. So what was said in the fourth verse again is further clarified here. Vyanjakatvam asyaha buddheya rupadi akarana drishyata. This buddhi which takes the rupadi akara, the form of a rupa or a color or form, so that's how drishyata, that's how the buddhi becomes drishya, becomes an object of perception, is perceived. Darshan yuketa apatti. See, buddhi itself doesn't have a form. So buddhi as it is may not become the object of perception. But when buddhi takes the form of an object, then it becomes the object of perception. Ghatakar vritti, patakar vritti. Tade vishaya vyanjakatvam iti. That's all is called the vyanjakatvam, the manifesting an object. That the buddhi takes the form of an object is also another way of saying that the buddhi illumines the object. Illumination is buddhi taking the form of the object. That's how buddhi removes the veil of ignorance. The perception takes place, supposedly in two stages. First of all, the buddhi takes the vritti, called ghatakara, and that removes the veil or avaranam of this object. And the chidabhasa, the consciousness reflected in the buddhi, illumines the object. So both are taken as one thing here, So tadeva vishaya vyanjakatvam, so that is called the vyanjakatvam, the manifesting of the object. Then Tika continues, Chaitanyami vishaya avhasa vishayascha na buddhe anyatra swatantrena sfurati. Chaitanyami vishaya avhasa. It is Chaitanya, the chidabhasa, that actually illumines that object or illumines the vritti. Vishayascha na buddhe anyatra swatantrena sfurati. See, Vishaya of the object cannot reveal itself independently unless the buddhi or the mind takes the form of that object. Vishayasya buddhi anyatra swatantrena sfurati. Vishaya and ghata cannot reveal itself unless the buddhi takes the form of that object. So swatantrena sfurati. A Ghatapata cannot independently on their own reveal themselves. It's only when the buddhi takes their form and illumined by the consciousness that the Ghata can be illuminated. Ghata cannot, because Ghata is a Jada, Paraprakashya. So it cannot reveal itself independently. It can reveal itself when it is illuminated by consciousness. So consciousness reflected in the mind takes the form of that object, and that reflected illumines that. So that's how the process is. तथा च बुद्धेः विषयाकारभावे चैतन्यस्य विषयात्मना स्फूर्तिः अनुपन्ना इति. So if the buddhi does not take the form of the object, such as Ghata, Chaitanya cannot in fact illumine. See, Chaitanya cannot directly illumine an object, by the way. Thus, the electricity cannot directly reveal, dispel the darkness. Electricity can do that only when it gets united with the tungsten filament and manifests as light. Then only it can remove darkness. So consciousness cannot directly reveal these objects. Like the tungsten filament, the consciousness also becomes identified with the mind, which assumes its form. That's how consciousness, through the agency of mind, illumines the object. Ultimately, consciousness illumines the object. Mind also is not conscious. But mind becomes required because mind assumes the form of the object. And mind is made of such material that mind reflects the consciousness. This is not made of that object. This object cannot reflect consciousness. Mind can. So mind takes the form of the object. That vritti, vishakar vritti, reflects the consciousness, and that is how the Vishaya or Ghatapada are illuminated. तथा च बुद्धे विषयकारात्म भावे. If buddhi did not take the form of the Vishaya such as Ghata, Chaitanyasya Vishayatmana Anupanna, then Chaitanya cannot reveal the object, or Chaitanya cannot shine as an object. You can say Chaitanya itself shines as the object through the object vritti. विषय अभिव्यक्त्यर्थतया तदाकारापत्येव बुद्धेः व्यञ्जकत्वमभिप्रायः. So when you say that the buddhi manifests an object, what it means is that the buddhi takes the form of that object. And then that Vishayakara buddhi is illumined by the consciousness. So even though buddhi was compared to the light in the fourth verse, it's not quite so. It is consciousness that alone is light. But since consciousness on its own cannot illuminate an object, consciousness requires agency to buddhi, which should take the form of that object, then only consciousness can illumine the object. So there we say buddhi illumines, or you can say consciousness illumines. Either way. यथा रूपादि आकारेण अवासमात्म देह रूपादि व्यंजकत्वम. That the buddhi illumines an object. What is meant is buddhi takes the form of that object. That is called the buddhi illumining the object. तथा दृशेः दृशेः आत्मनः ये उद्भवे धर्माधर्म सदुत्पत्तो सत्याम तद्व्याप्तिः तदात्मना सुरमेव दृष्टत्वम्. Similarly, you say Atma is Drashta. In what way is Atma Drashta? Drushehe, that is from the verse. Drashtutvam cha drushehe tadvad vyapti syad dhya udbhave, second line of the sixth verse. Tad drushehe atmanah dhya udbhave. Dhi means buddhi. Ghatakar vritti. When the Ghatakar vritti comes into being, when vritti takes the form of Ghata, and that's how Ghatakar vritti comes into being. That's udbhava of the vritti. So what's the reason why a given thought arises? Dharma, dharmavashahad utpattau. That is just to make it precise that why does a given thought arise in the mind at a given time? The reason is karma. What karma? Dharma karma. So that also plays a role, that the buddhi contexts an object, takes the form and appears in the mind. Why did buddhi only go to that object, etc.? So karma also plays a role. Anyway, just to make it complete, dharma, dharmasat, utpato satyam. Thus when ghatakara vritti arises, tad vyapti, what is meant by pervading that vritti? Tada atmana suranameva drashtutvam. And then the drushi, the consciousness also appears as having taken the form of that vritti. That's called drashtutvam. So there is no primary drashtutvam in the atma, except that the consciousness seems to take the form of that vritti. That's how the vritti is illumined. That phenomenon is called the drashtutvam or atma being drashta. Buddhi taking the form of the object is called the illumining of the object by buddhi, and consciousness illumining the buddhi is called the drashtutvam, the seeing of the consciousness. Na parinamaha. So buddhi undergoes the change to assume the form of the object. Consciousness or light does not undergo a change. It just in its presence the buddhi becomes illumined. Yadyapi dhya vishaya-vyapti parinamantara na bhavati. Tikakar also says that even the buddhi has to pervade the object and take the form of the object, so parinama, change has to happen in buddhi, then only vishaya-vyapti is possible. Vishaya-deshe tasya, because buddhi is not where the vishaya is. So buddhi has to go where the vishaya is. Just as the water must flow into that shape of the garden, so also buddhi is inside, vishaya is outside. So buddhi is not where the vishaya is. So buddhi must go where the vishaya is, then only the vishayakara vritti is possible. So that is why the buddhi has to change. To take the form of the vishaya, then only buddhi can, you can say, objectify the vishaya or illumine the vishaya. But that's not the way case with consciousness. Consciousness doesn't have to go anywhere. Consciousness is everywhere. If consciousness also needed to go from inside to outside, then consciousness also required to change. But no, it's always there. And so, therefore, तथा चैतन्यात्मन धीवृत्ति व्याप्तो न परिणाम अपेक्षा तद्धावतोन्यानत्येति तिष्ठत तदेजति तन्ने सो अनेजदेकं मनसो जवीयः नैनद्देवः आत्मपूर्वमर्श. So says Upanishad that even the sense organs of devatas could not overcome or outspeed it because it's already there. And therefore, the buddhi has to run there. Atma, because when you see a bird flying in the sky, when do you see? When the light is already there. The light doesn't have to travel. Because light is all pervasive. So consciousness is all pervasive. Therefore, you can say that, it has already overtaken everything. No, it's already there. But buddhi requires to take the form, so buddhi must undergo change. Therefore, the buddhi revealing an object is by taking the form of that object. The consciousness revealing object, just by presence of consciousness, that object is revealed. So, in case of consciousness, no parinama, no change is required, no change takes place. Chidatmaneva tat prakasha kabilitaya eva dhira sada utpatte dibhava. Tat prakasha valitaya. Valitaya means surrounded. Kavalitayaha. So Kavali also means, you have to swallow it. So then Prakasha Kavalitaya is there. The Dhi is already surrounded by the Prakasha, or is swallowed by the Prakasha. Meaning that Buddhi is surrounded by the Prakasha, illumined by the Prakasha. So Dhiya, whenever Buddhi Vritti happens, is already soaked in consciousness. The Buddhi Vritti, whenever it arises, is always soaked in consciousness that arises because consciousness is already there. That's not the case with the Buddhi. When the Vishaya gets soaked by Buddhi, the Buddhi has to undergo a change. When Buddhi Vritti gets soaked by consciousness by his very presence illumines a Buddhi Vritti. So Dhiya sada utpattehe vidbhava. Whenever Buddhi Vritti arises, it always arises soaked in consciousness. So consciousness is changeless, motionless. So anejad ekam manaso anejat, conscious anejat is immobile, immoving. Manaso javiya, still it is faster than the mind. Nainad deva apnuvan, the sense organs also could not overtake that. Purvamarsa is already there. Meaning that consciousness already all pervasive. The mind and sense organs have to run to catch an object. Consciousness doesn't have to. So therefore, drashtutvam, or the seerness of the consciousness is simply being there and not any change or parinama. For buddhi, drashtutvam is that buddhi takes the form of an object. But that is not the way drashtutvam consciousness is. Consciousness is all pervasive, already illuminating everything, and therefore, without any change of being a drashta, consciousness sees or illumines everything. Buddhi should become drashta in a primary sense. Consciousness just illumines, and that's how it is called drashta. Oh. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.